Hello and welcome back to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. It's good to have you here. I hope you are well. And this is review number 29, second part of my series looking at World Whiskey Awareness. And we're in Canada. Now, before I get lots of complaints in the comments section from people saying, we know Canada produces whiskey. We're well aware of the fact that Canada makes whiskey. Of course we're well aware of the fact that Canada makes whiskey. I have my reasons for putting it in this series based on World Whiskey Awareness. And here is that reason, or those reasons. Canada, yes, produces whiskey. Well known, big world producer of whiskey. But it has been mentioned more than once that they tend to keep the good stuff for themselves. We tend to get here in the UK, so I can only offer you reviews of what I can get my hands on. And we tend to get the generic stuff, the Canadian Club, maybe Crown Royal, those kind of generic blends. As I say, it has been mentioned before that the Canadians are well into producing good whiskey, but they do tend to keep the good stuff for themselves. So it's quite difficult to get some of the better whiskies this side of the pond. And this is one that I have seen come up a time or two. I wanted a 100% rye whiskey, which this is. Canada, for those relatively new to whiskey, produce whiskey and generally use rye, or it's used an awful lot in Canadian whiskey production, and they, within their laws, basically just call whiskey, even rye whiskey, just call it whiskey. So you'll maybe find that they don't draw attention to the fact that it's rye. It doesn't make any difference. It's just, you're maybe just looking at whiskey, Canadian whiskey is rye. But this one, Lot 40 rye whiskey. This is one now produced in the Hiram Walker and Sons Distillery in Windsor, Ontario. Actually the same distillery that produces Canadian Club, Four Beam Suntory. So big mass production distillery there in Ontario. And as I said, this is one that I've seen about and heard good things about. Rye is a bit like peat sometimes, or it can be a bit of a divider. You either like it or you don't. I do tend to like rye. If you've dipped your toe in rye, for example, say Woodford Reserve rye or Bullet or maybe Jim Beam or something like that there, you'll find, yes, these are rye whiskies, but they'll maybe not be a great, it's maybe just over, as soon as it's over 51% rye in the mash bill, it's considered rye whiskey. This, as I say, is 100% rye. So you get to really involve yourself in rye with this. 43% ABV it is bottled at. We'll not get into to chill filtration, colour added. Canadian law does allow for colour to be added. Chill filtration, pass. It's changes from place to place, doesn't it? So we'll leave that off the table. On the nose, rye has a very, very specific thing, and I like it. I do like rye whiskey. You generally tend to find with rye, you'll hear words like licorice, prickly, peppery, things like that. This actually doesn't, to me, tick a lot of those boxes. This is something slightly different. I haven't added water to this, and I won't be adding water to this. I did add water to it during my taking my tasting notes, different quantities of water from here to there, and I didn't find water did an awful lot for it, in fairness. As I say, it's bottled at 43%. There is a cask strength version of this, but yet again, I couldn't get my hands on it because Canada likes to keep the good stuff. On the nose, initial introduction to this, there's almost a meaty thing to it. Savoury, char and like charred meat, like burnt ends almost. Slight woodiness, I would suggest, rather than being woody like oak or anything. It's more like cork, more like a cork note off it. Green vegetative hints, slight mintiness, but fresh mint, and then the sweet and sugary notes start to come through, but real, yet again, that char hangs around, so you get like a creme brulee, meringue, you know, that, even a fresh meringue where it's just crisp, burnt sugar, even burnt toast. I keep it, as I say, charred ends, burnt this, burnt that. There's not a, I wouldn't suggest it's a burnt smell of it. It's just caramelized, you know, something that's just freshly heated, something like that. That burnt toast, very slight. Honey, yes, there's honey there. Even maybe slight coffee in the background. Peppery, but not prickly, as I say, which is something you will get with ryes. You will find that there's a prickly thing with some of this. I don't find there is. Rye is a more of a winter grain. It's related to wheat. It's a good sturdy grain, so it's used or planted over the winter months. Clove in the background. Onto the palate. Slightly thin comes in. Slight saltiness on the delivery, but it is thin, which I find quite surprising because it's quite viscous. It does have good legs. It's quite thin, doesn't like to coat, but there's some great sweet fruity notes there, which, considering what was in the rest of it, it's kind of bizarre that all those char notes and all. It's like almost fresh. I got like almost like a black grape with sharp, quite bitter, or slight bitter tinge. Cherries, bitter cherries. It almost has after a while, there's almost a numbing sensation in the tongue, which you would get with like clove rock, for example. Now, clove rock, depending on where you are in the world, clove rock's just candies basically. But it's clove, very strong clove flavour. It is peppery, even on the palate, but not prickly. Slight dry hay, and then the big one that comes in and stays, and then you'll find that basically changes this whiskey, and it's cherry throat lozenges. There was a specific brand I had in mind called Tunes, which we had here in the UK, or still have in the UK. So if you know cherry tunes, that's the ones we're talking about. But it is cherry throat lozenges, and it becomes the thing that basically like switches on in your head, and you go, that's what it is all day long. And what it does is, when you get back to the nose, then the clove becomes the domineering element in the nose. No bad thing, don't get me wrong. It makes for a good pleasant nose still. A lot of that char and the savoury notes start to dissipate to the back, but that clove and cherry lozenge thing is big on the front of the palate, and then just, as I say, it's quite thin, so it does move on quite quick, and then you get into the finish pretty quickly because it's quite thin. And the finish, as I say, quite short, but the flavour, the amount of flavour in the finish makes up for the fact that it doesn't hang around long. So you're left with memories of this cherry lozenge, this cherry throat lozenge. A slightly dry, tannic black tea, slightly, but just lots and lots of flavour, you know. So I like it for that reason, because recently I've found myself some whiskies being defined by what the finish has left me with. If you're left with something bitter that just, let's face it, that can be your memory of that dram, is the finish, because it's the aftertaste, it's what you're left with. And on that last mouthful out of the glass, when there's nothing left to wash it away, doesn't matter how good the nose, the development, any of that is, if you're left with just this bitterness and nothing to back it up, that tends to put me off some whiskies. And I have been put off whiskies in the past, a brand, because I've had a bad experience with two of their, you know, just for an example, I've just had some of these that have been put off because of a better finish or aftertaste. This I like. I genuinely do like this. As I say, if you want a good representation of something that's 100% rye, if you want a good representation of something Canadian, Lot 40 Rye Whisky, very good. And what would I give it in a rating? From there, 8 out of 10, because yes, 100% rye, Canadian, it's only 43%. I would like to try the cask strength version of it, but we don't have that currently. This here, definitely nice stuff. Onward and upward. Time to share the love again. And because we're in Canada, and I want to share the love with someone that I have been watching since. Whiskey tubers tend to mean as much to me as whiskey itself. You know, there's those that I just have watched since I started collecting, since I started my journey, and I've just watched them, and just they're always there in the background, and I rely on them to let me know what they think of these whiskies, etc. You know, and there's two guys from Canada who I've been watching pretty much since day one, and here they are. And hold on. Nope, those guys know something about alcohol, but not who I'm looking for. Know who that is. Oh. There we have it. Trinity and C. Couple of guys to say, a couple of good Canadians who have been around on my whiskey journey pretty much since the very start. And their enthusiasm for whiskey and just their enjoyment of it is why I keep going back. They talk about whiskey the way, you know, they talk about whiskey in the way that I would like to. They're, as I say, the way they experience it, the way they enjoy it, and the enthusiasm that they put into it are, to me, enthralling. Things like that just with them are enthralling, and it keeps me going back, as I said, for more. They both have their own individual views on what they like. Sometimes they meet in the middle, sometimes they don't. And they're just good at what they do, in my opinion. So if you haven't, give Trinity and C a look. If nothing else, their merch is quality. I love what they do with their merchandise. Haven't actually got around to getting any of it, but I will probably at some point. So there you go. That's the love shared for this episode. Trinity and C, worth watching. That is that much wrapped up, and I appreciate you being and staying around till now. I want to go one further this episode and mention something that I haven't mentioned yet. I have had, and I've dropped it into the comment section below, I have had a Patreon. I have had Patreon going in the background for quite some time, but I've never mentioned it before. I've never quite switched it on because it's been in the background, and I've been sort of trying to avoid, I've had enough going on. Been quite happy with the way things have been going. I appreciate the subscriptions so much. I appreciate everybody joining in, just watching these videos. You've no idea how much I appreciate that. Patreon has been on there in the background, it's been ticking away in the background, but I've never really, as I say, looked at it until now. And there's a reason for that. And the reason why I've switched it on now is I got my first patron without asking. And it's sort of give me that poke and said, right, let's just try this. Let's get it switched on and see if we can get a bit, because the channel's moving forward quite happily the way I like it to move, but there are other things I've had in the back of my mind to do. I'd like to do more live work, etc. But I just don't have the funds for software, etc. for things like that to keep it moving the way I would like to do it. So any support I could get would be greatly appreciated. There'll be a link for my Patreon down in the description below. Before I move away from it, that first person to switch this on, somebody who had my respect anyway, and now has also done this for me, and it's Whiskey Jason, an American in Germany. And I'm not going to go too deep into it because at some point there'll be a love shared with Whiskey Jason, but I just want to say thank you to Jason, who's my first patron, and let's just say he's a star, and I really, really do appreciate his support. And anybody, as I say, if you can, I will keep the pledges set at, I'll keep the tiers all set open. You can give as much or as little as you want, and I'll try that and see if it works. If it doesn't, we might have to put a little more structure into it. But it's just for now to see, as I say, if we can get this thing going. Any support will be much, much appreciated. This is for Jason. Thank you so much, sir. And to everyone else, all my supporters, here's to your good health. Cheers. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.